I've mentioned sighting angles before. I just wanted to show you that's what I'm doing here, and this is what my setup looks like. So you can see my paper is fairly close to the printout of the hand that I'm drawing. So by the way, I took the photo myself. It's my own hand, and I'm drawing my own hand, which I think is better than borrowing something from the internet. Anyway, I'm looking at the angle. I'm actually holding it right up against the paper, and I'm just transferring that angle over here. If you lock your arm so that your elbow doesn't bend, so you lock it straight, you can do this without actually holding it up to the paper. You could do it from life too. So if you're looking at the angle of a rooftop or something like that, you can lock your elbow and take that angle and transfer it to your paper. So it's an angular transfer method. All right, so I am doing this demonstration in pencil, just like you are doing. In fact, I'm pretty much using the same exact materials you are using. I just pulled a sheet from my sketchbook and clipped it up to a board. Now, the one difference is that I'm working upright and you most likely are working on a table looking down. And for me, I have worked upright for so many years, it's hard for me to look down at something. So that's why I'm doing it, but it's also because of the camera, because the camera angle can't quite capture it as well looking down over the top of my head. So anyway, what I'm doing there is I am making a few marks to indicate how big the hand should be in relationship to the wrist. And I'm checking those angles, and I'm doing kind of a gestural sketch. Very light, you can probably barely see it on there, but I'm just trying to get the gist of things. And that way, if I'm using broken line and I'm using a very light touch with the pencil, if I make a mistake, because inevitably I will, I can correct it. I'm just going to speed things up so you can see the drawing process happening. So things to keep in mind are going life size. So that means the actual size of your hand, and I would use your hand as an indicator. Look for negative shapes. So negative shapes are open areas of space, and they create a shape of their own. So look for those. Look and compare things, like is the palm wider than the wrist, which it is. And then compare like the length of the fingers, because if your fingers are bent, they're not all going to be equal, they're going to be at different lengths. Check the angles on things. So heads up, once you are done with your outline in full, you are going to be turning it in so that I can take a look and provide you some rather immediate feedback. That way, before you continue on to shading, I can take a look and see if there's any issues with proportion. This is going to be a critical step, no matter what you're drawing or painting, that you have the outline solid. And I've told students this before, that this stage is pivotal. If you have any mistakes, you want to fix them now, before the shading, before the details. All right, so I've started to draw a 1 by 7 inch rectangle, and I've made some marks there. I accidentally did this off camera, yikes. But what this is, it's going to be a very simple kind of grid of 1 by 7 inch blocks, and you can see I'm using a ruler here. This grid is going to become our first value scale, and I'm putting it directly on the drawing. If you feel like you don't want it on your drawing, you could do it on a separate piece of paper, but I'm using good drawing paper here. For you, I'd actually recommend you take one of the white sheets that I gave you and use that for both the hand and for that scale. And it's going to be a 7 block scale. So I'm just outlining it in marker so you can see it a little clearer. And it was fun to add a tiny bit of color. Those of you who have never been initiated into values or value scale, what it is simply a shift between a light shade to a dark shade, or vice versa. So it's a range, in this case, of grays that we're working through. We're trying to get 7 different variations of gray. So starting off with the white of the paper and moving all the way towards the darkest dark we can do with our pencil. there are people in this class who I'm sure have done value scales before. I still want you to do one. You can, if you have experience, you can do this with a different shading method, like cross-hatching or dots if you like that labor intensity, or scribble. So any of those methods also work, but I still need to see a shift of 7 going from lights to dark. So again, once you've done your outline of your hand, take a photo, turn it in on Google Classroom, and then start working on your value scale. You really don't need me a whole lot when you're doing your scale, but I do want you to watch this video while I'm doing it. So here's what I do. You can see I'm starting at the opposite ends, so I'm at 7, which is going to be our darkest dark. And because I'm using pencil just like you, I'm going in these kind of oval patterns. It's kind of hard to see it, but I'm doing a tight oval curl here. So that's a good method for shading because it fills in all the gaps in the paper and it has nice even effect. So I am taking my darkest pencil that I have. For you, that's going to be your blue pencil. It looks like royal blue, and it says 6B on the side. So pencils come in different ranges. Not all pencils are exactly the same, so you want to read them. You may have a pack of pencils that range from like 2H or 4H all the way up to 8B or higher, depending on what kit you have. For you guys, the baggie I gave you has a 2B, a 4B, and a 6B. Heads up, your 2B is your yellow pencil. So I always go into scales knowing that I'm going to probably need to double back and darken things up. What I don't want to have happen is for me to realize, oh darn, I have to lighten a shade up. So it's better to err on the side of too light than too dark. That's especially true as we move towards the 2s. Even a 3 can be deceptive. So better to go too light and have to darken up than to erase off. That's also true of when you're working on shading with the hand. Let me speed this up for you so you don't have to watch me shading all day. It did take me at least 30 minutes to do both the hand outline and this value scale. So I do recommend doing number 6 next. I think that order makes a lot of sense to me, to aim for the darks first because you already have number 1 done because you don't have to do any shading on it. So here's number 2. So I've skipped. I went right to number 2. Here's what to keep in mind because I don't want you to have gaps in your shading on this either, or if you do, they have to be minuscule. I want you to try holding your pencil farther back. Like you can't see my fingertips there because I'm holding it farther back. Try the circles, but also barely touch your paper with the point. I'm letting the weight of the point of the pencil do most of the work. I'm hardly putting any exertion on my fingertips. So again, better to go too light here than to go too dark. Err on the side of barely there. For 3, you might need to put a little bit of pressure, but don't go too dark too fast. There's a danger there. Again, same idea that you don't want to go too dark and then have to erase out. So I'm kind of going at an angle, trying to do some of those little tight circles. You do want nice even shading, no patchy shading ideally. With the value scale, you should see kind of a visual beat between each jump to the next square. So it should be like a progression. So first one, white. Second one, light gray. Third one, a little bit darker gray. Fourth one, middle tone. Fifth tone, even darker. Sixth tone, slate gray. 7, as black as you can do. So I am using a 4B, so I'm using that turquoise pencil of yours. I'm actually using one of my pencils, that's why it's not turquoise, but it is a 4B, so it's the same thing. And I recommend using the 4B on the 4 and on the 5 there. Just don't press too hard on the 4. All right, so you can see that's what mine looks like, and there is a visual progression there. A little bit hard to see the 2, but there is shading on that 2. Scale is due by Friday. I'm hoping that most of you progress to shading by Friday too.